Okay, guys, now you're looking at my screen already. I'm going to silence everybody so that we don't get any interruptions or background noises. It's not because you are making any commentaries that are probably not suitable. No, 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 no. That's not the reason. The reason is because of the background noise. All right. So let's see. You can see my presentation already then. So we're going to start seeing the Cold War years, and obviously this is the war that is right after the Second World War. In the second partial, we saw that the Second World War ended with United States taking the, who is making sounds? Hold on. Hold on. God bless you, Fatima. Okay. I don't know who's making sounds. Guys, put yourselves in mute so that we can proceed. Oh, Amanda can do it. Don't worry. Hi, Amanda. Say hi to Amanda. All right, so let's look at it. Hi, Amanda. Don't worry. In the early Cold War years, this is right after the Second World War, and we were saying that in the Second World War, the United States was the absolute winner, not only in what comes to war terms, but also in what comes to economic terms. Remember, like the last video that we saw, it gave us a lot of statistics about how the United States multiplied like by 300 folds the military bases that it had around the world. It tripled or quadrupled their gross domestic product, el Producto Interno Bruto. It totally like broke all its own records. Okay, so after that, in 1948, we're going to have in the world an establishment of a new world order. Everything is changing. Before Second World War, United States was one of the wealthy. It was one of the powerful. It was one of the big superpowers in the world. Irving, okay. Hold on. There. Now, after the Second World War, it was really two major blocks. One was led by the United States of America, and the other one was going to be led by the USSR. We still have Joseph Stalin in power. He is going to die in the year 1953. Tania Zamorano, welcome. And so we are going to still have the communism at its stake, at its highest point, okay? And so in this point, we're going to divide history again, the 20th century, into a very important chapter, the Cold War. We're going to name it the Cold War because supposedly there wasn't any frontal conflict or any military confrontation. However, we're going to see three very hot spots within the Cold War, namely the Cuban Missile Crisis with John F. Kennedy as one of the protagonists. We're going to have the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Okay, those are the three most famous ones. Now, very early in the Cold War years, we're going to have a clash of powers between the USSR and the United States that is going to be repeated as a pattern for the rest of the war. Now, the first thing we need to know is that the Cold War was named after its supposed to be nature, that there wasn't any military frontal conflict amongst the superpowers, the new superpowers. Now, the war was fought in Asia and it was fought in Europe. So the first thing that we need to notice is that obviously these countries that were just getting out of war, they were not ready for any policy, especially economic policy, for growth. They were focused in reconstruction policies, okay? Reconstruction of its economy, of its social entanglement, of its political factions, and all the movements that go within a country after a very big conflict. And remember, the Second World War lasted from 1939 to 1945. So it was 6 years, 6 very, very long years in which we're going to have all the economy and all the forces and all the efforts focused exactly and only and solely and absolutely on winning the war. Okay? So this period of time is going to be very, very important for the shaping of the second half of the 20th century. Things that we still live right now. Okay? In 2017, for example, there was a war in Ukraine, and it was the reminiscence, the residuals of the Cold War, because not all conflicts were put aside when the Cold War ended. Okay, we're gonna name 1989 as its end point because that's the year in which one of the most iconic symbols of the communist regime was torn apart, which was the fall of the Berlin Wall. All right, so let's begin. Look how groovy. Okay, so the first part of the Cold War is, as I just told you, reconstruction and confrontation. Okay, the parties are going to be allies during World War II, namely United States and the USSR. However, as soon as the war ended, they were again rivals because remember, democracy has nothing to do with communism. Capitalism has nothing to do with communism. They were natural rivals. They were natural rivals, and they just got together during the war with one sole purpose, and with Germany. Punish Germany, get them out of the game. Okay, that was the only purpose. Once they get that goal accomplished, they break apart. And now they're enemies again. Remember that little phrase that we were saying over and over again that is repeated over and over in all the conflicts during the 20th century? Well, is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so, under that logic, they're going to team up. And now, obviously, once they get their objective, which is getting Germany out of the picture, now we're going to have a very humongous rivalry. Okay, so the first years are about reconstruction, as we said, the main superpowers in Europe, the main countries involved in Second World War in Asia are going to be focusing all their efforts in reconstruction, in everything that getting back to normal, okay, restructuring their lives. And another element that is very important, confrontation. These two big rivals are not only going to express and manifest openly that they are rivals, but they're also going to sign two treaties in the communist world. Is going to be called the Warsaw Pact, Varsovia, the Warsaw Pact, and it's going to align, it's going to team up all the communist regime countries and republics that Russia, the USSR, has its influence on. Okay, we're going to call those countries the Iron Curtain countries, La Cortina de Hierro. Okay, it's all these Eastern European countries that, well, nowadays a lot of them do not exist. For example, Yugoslavia, for example, Czechoslovakia, they don't exist. They just broke apart. Okay, now they're Czech Republic and Slovakia. The Yugoslavia broke apart, and now it's Bosnia Herzegovina and Serbia and Montenegro and all of these little countries that are in the Balkanic Peninsula, where everything in the First World War started. Remember, with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. So in the part one, we're going to have these two basic characteristics. All right. And obviously, as we just mentioned, we're going to have an ideological struggle between the Soviet and Eastern Bloc that we just mentioned, the Iron Curtain, and versus the US and the Western democracies. All right. So what's the goal of the first bloc? Spread worldwide communism. They were committed to make these a world government. Okay, one of the things that bothered Hitler the most, remember that Hitler, besides being a national socialist, he and being anti-Semitic, wanting to eliminate the Jews, one of the things that he wanted is to eliminate communism because he was a very nationalistic agenda guy. And one of the things that he hated the most, especially about communism, was its universality. He believed that to have nation and patriotic symbols and a cohesion and unity based on race, based on language, based on cultural similarities is stronger, far, far more stronger than its opposite, a worldwide whatever ideology that there is. So Hitler would be against Judaism and against communism because they had that one factor. Independently where Jews are in the world, spread out, they feel like they belong to one race. So that means that people that have a cultural identity as opposed to a national identity, Hitler would believe that those people are traitors, potential traitors. Okay, potential traitors. Why? Because you have a loyalty that is higher than your own national belonging. You see that? You see how he mixes that up? And so communism and Jewish people have that one thing in common that he hated the most, which was that they do not respond or they do not put in the highest of their value hierarchy belonging to a nation, to a country, but they put as a higher value a belonging to some higher identity. Same thing happens with Catholicism because it's a worldwide ideology. So those are the three like groups that he most attacked. And also he attacked homosexuals, he attacked everything that could have a higher identity than a nation identity. Okay, he hated that. And communism is pro everything that is contrary to nationalism. Okay, so their goal is to spread worldwide communism, and they were committed and they were making a very huge campaign about gaining and gaining more and more followers. Okay, gaining more and more followers. So they would exert a lot of power, political power that they had for the last decades over some territories. Another, imperialism. Remember the definition of imperialism with which we started the course in the first partial is the takeover of another weaker country by a stronger nation. And so this is another ideological imperialism camouflage as the spread of a worldwide communism. Okay, what are they opposed to? These Soviet and Eastern Bloc nations, the Iron Curtain or the Warsaw Pact countries, as we know them. Okay, they're going to be opposed to United States, obviously, and the Western democracies. The same thing, the Allies and its satellites. Okay, these big countries are going to work like Europe, like, hello, yes? I'm doing good. Is anything wrong? What happened? Guys, don't confuse me. Where are we? Yes, sweetie, I'm here. What do you want? I'm in my computer. My phone is totally out of wire. Okay. So we were saying that blah, 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 communism versus the Western democracies. Now remember, the Western democracies are the allies. Oh, I remember what we were saying. We were saying that these superpowers, like Great Britain, like United States, like the USSR, are going to work like big planets. For example, Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter has like 9 moons. It has, I don't know how many moons it has, but it has many moons. Let's say it has 9 moons, and those moons are called satellites. They are little mass bodies that revolve around, because of the gravitational forces, they revolve around one big planet. All right. So the bigger the planet, the more gravitational force it has, and it's logical that it has more satellites. Okay, now that's the concept of a satellite. When we talk about superpowers and its satellite countries, we're going to talk about these 2 big powers namely United States of America and the USSR, and their satellites are going to be these little countries that are going to sign the Warsaw Pact and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, or in Spanish, OTAN, that document, that treaty, international treaty. And and we're gonna call them satellites because they revolve around this ideology. So the whole world during the Cold War is going to be divided in these two blocks. All right. So up to now, any questions? No. Perfect. You guys are awesome. Okay, now methodologies. What were their main tools so that they can oppose to each other or they can have this confrontation, this ideological struggle? Okay, one of them was the espionage. Okay, we're going to have the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, on behalf of the United States, and the KGB or KGB, which is the same exact thing of the CIA, but in its Russian version. All right? What is this? Okay. Also, an arms race. This is kind of like a period, a very prolonged period that was much, much, much longer than the armed peace. Remember, when we saw the First World War, we talked about a term, it was the armed peace. We were seeing that all these superpowers in Europe were not in an actual conflict. They were not with a war declaration, an open war declaration. However, they were preparing and gearing up for war. Namely, Germany had like 2 million people recruited and ready for whatever thing that may happen in the future. And Great Britain had a lot of forces too, cavalry and artillery and submarines and plane carriers and all these type of weaponry that we already saw. And so that period of time before the First World War was triggered and was openly declared between each other, it was called the armed peace. Armed peace is kind of like the same, but it lasted less than the Cold War. This is another, or armed peace reloaded, like another version 2.0, okay, of the armed peace. Is the Cold War. What is very characteristic of the Cold War? The arms race. Race as a 42-kilometer race, okay? And arms, well, weaponry. And that's when, since we had the two first nuclear weapons being detonated in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, now obviously we're open to an atomic age, to an atomic period in which atomic weapons and nuclear escalation is going to play a very significant role in this second part of the 20th century. And finally, the ideological competition for the minds and hearts of the third world peoples. Now, this is the period of time in which we're going to coin that term, the third world. Those are the communist government and command economy versus democratic government and capitalist economy. Those are the proxy wars, the satellite wars, the puppet wars. Okay, United States and the USSR are not going to engage in a frontal military confrontation. However, they're going to have proxy wars, namely the Cuban Missile Crisis, namely Vietnam War, Korean War, the Afghanistan crisis. Okay, so in these little countries or spots in the world map, we're going to have Vietnam against the United States, but because the USSR was imposing a government, a puppet government, onto the Vietnamese people, same thing as the Korean Peninsula, and well, because of that, United States was not going to allow any further advance of the opposite ideology, and so they would launch a campaign, awful campaigns. It was a bad remembrance. It's gone into history books as the worst decisions that the United States presidents have ever made, which was the intervention in Vietnam and intervention in Korea. Now, you remember that as one of the consequences of the intervention of the United States soldiers into the Vietnam War was the peace movement or the hippie movement. Okay, wanting peace and asking the governments for peace. And there were a lot of marches and manifestations in Washington, D.C. before the Capitol, because this was a very big urgency of the people, because it was their children, their sons, their husbands that were off to war. They were deployed to war, for a war that wasn't even theirs, for a war that wasn't even fought in the name of the United States, but was fought in the name of the democratic countries of the world, and against one like ghost enemy, which was not exactly Vietnam or Korean people or the government, but the USSR that was behind and was moving all the threads of the puppets in those governments correspondingly. Okay, so this is kind of like what's going on during the Cold War within these years. Okay, any questions up to now? Let me go back to this. Let's chat a little. Any questions, guys? No? No? Who else is here? Me more. Everything good? Okay. All right. A verte. What happened? Do you have cooties? You got cooties. Yes. All right, guys. So, if you have no questions, we're gonna go one more topic, okay? Hey. I know, right? Perfect. Okay, let's go to the presentation again. Blah, blah, blah. ¿Quién sabe qué? Can you see my screen? Perfect. Okay, now let's look at the map, because you know I love maps and I don't think you can understand anything without looking at a map. So here it is. Remember that after World War II, we're going to have Germany be divided into 4 dependencies. 3 of them are going to be given to the Regency of Great Britain, United States, and France as a token for their victory. And then on the other side, we're going to have East Germany that is given to the USSR for custody. And so since what we're going to have in history after the Second Paris Conference and all these treaties that decided this division is going to be the rivalry between the USSR and the USA, then, and capitalism being rising up versus communism, they're going to be forced or obliged, well, that's what they say at least, of dividing Germany into 2. So this is the first time that we're going to have 2 Germanys, West Germany and East Germany. And you see how here this division is going to be very close to Berlin. And this division is going to be marked by a wall, the construction of a wall that divides the capitalist parts of Germany and the communist parts of Germany. As the history says, and a lot of movies have been made about this specific topic, we're going to have families being divided. I mean, people that were related and they could not see each other again ever, okay? For example, and so on and so forth. Okay, so here we're going to have assume of the West and East Germany, and how this is the Soviet part and this is the democratic part. All right. And then here in the map, this part, this like dark pink, is going to be the territories lost to Germany. This was German before the Second World War ends, and now they're going to be Russian, if we were to say. And this is the countries that were won over the Soviet Union, because remember, the first move that they made between Germany and the Soviet Union, Stalin and Hitler, when they signed the non-aggression pact back in 1939, that it was a fake treaty, they were promising each other that they would not attack each other at an event of war. And the first thing that they did was divide Poland into two, so that the Soviet Union would occupy all the way up to Warsaw, and Germany would invade Poland on the other side. Okay, now these in Poland, you know, because of the history reading, that in Poland we had the majority of the concentration camps, and above everything, the extermination camps. The most famous one is Auschwitz. Okay, and now here the green ones are the territory gained by the Soviet Union, and this part, this line, this red line, is going to be denominated as the Iron Curtain. After 1955, all the countries that are supposed to be to the right of this line are going to be communist, and all the countries on the west of this line are going to be democracies. Okay? That is what we're going to refer as the Iron Curtain. The line that divides the democratic world, the democratic capitalistic world, from the communist regimes that are going to be won over by the USSR. Now, you can see that Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Poland are there. Not to say Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine. And as I was mentioning before, in Ukraine, like this past 2017, we still had a war, an armed conflict that was a confrontation between one faction of Ukrainian people against another Ukrainian people. It was a civil war, which means that people from the same population fight each other for some purpose. And the purpose, or one of the main causes of that war that happened only 2 years ago, that killed a lot of people, was precisely that some people said that they belonged to Russia, nowadays Russia, and some people said that they belonged to Ukraine, that they wanted to keep their independence. Meanwhile, the other part of Ukraine wanted to belong to Russia, to annex their territory to the Russian government. Now, obviously, the Ukrainian government is not a very good government. It's not providing for them economically, socially, politically, you name it. Okay, you name it. But they're very unconformed with the way that the government is treating them. Okay, so that's why they were kind of like trying to jump in the Russian train. That's the Iron Curtain, okay? So if I ask you to define the Iron Curtain, is all the countries that fell under communist regimes in Eastern Europe. Already? Okay, this is great. And this is a quote from Sir Winston Churchill, from studying in the Balkans to Trieste in the Adriatic Sea. You see the Adriatic Sea, guys? Okay. An Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lies the ancient capitals of Central and Eastern Europe. Okay, that's a term that Sir Winston Churchill coined. All right. And now, Truman, as you remember, he ascends to power in the administration of the United States government in 1944. Okay, he was elected in 1944. FDR, Frederick Delano Roosevelt, was the former president. He goes out of office, And Truman is the one that has to decide if dropping the atomic bombs or not. He's the one that has to make the most difficult decision of all times, of all history, during all the times of human records. Okay, so Truman, after World War II ends, okay, he's going to launch a Truman Doctrine. Okay, what is this Truman Doctrine going to defend? Number one, civil war in Greece. Okay, they're going to support the civil war in Greece. Now, remember, the civil war is an event in which two factions of the same nation, the same country, the same people are fighting against each other for some specific interests and purposes. Okay. Number two, Turkey, under pressure from the USSR for concessions in the Dardanelles. We're talking about territorial demands, okay, territorial interests. Now, remember, all the Cold War is going to be fought in a satellite-based logic. We're not going to fight directly. It's not like we're going to go, specifically like Harry Truman is going to go himself and talk to the Russian governor or the whatever guy that is in charge. They're going to make up this whole apparent conflict about political issues within a territory or historical confrontations within a land, and they're going to support the side that supports their interests, their own personal United States American war hero interests. All right. So that's everything that it's saying about the civil war in Greece and the Turkey under pressure from the USSR for concessions in the Dardanelles. Okay. Those are territorial demands. Territorial demands that obviously the United States was very, very interested in keeping those territories under any power that would fall under their domain. Okay, they couldn't conquer anymore because imperialism, it was supposed to be seen as negative in this period of time. However, we're going to have to do an imperialistic move with a fake apparent reason that we're defending some just cause so that it justifies whatever action that I'm undergoing. Okay, number three. The U.S. should support free peoples throughout the world. Look at that, okay? The United States of America is going to fight with the flag of the defenders of freedom of all peoples. That is, if one country has the right of self-determination, remember when we saw in the first and second partial, the defense of the Wilson Doctrine. Woodrow Wilson is the president of the United States of America that was entering World War I. And one of his 14 points, he was supposed to be an idealistic, a pacifist, and he defended the human right of all nations to self-determine. That is, if a group of people, an enough big group of people, determines or feels that they have a national identity different from whatever conqueror that there is on top of them, imperialistically wise, okay, they have the right, said Woodrow Wilson back in its time, to self-determine, to proclaim their own independence. Okay, now that is what it says on paper. We're going to see that the reality is very, very different. You're going to have the right to proclaim yourself independent from whatever sovereign higher power, as long as, and that's the key word, as long as you do not mess with our interests and you obey and you are the instrument for us so that we can get our own instruments. And that's what we're going to call a puppet government. Okay, because somebody is working the threads and working everything so that it works in their own behalf, in their own interests. Okay, so they're going to say, United States is going to proclaim themselves the defenders of the freedoms of people. So whenever they're going to intervene in Vietnam, they're going to intervene in Korea, they're going to intervene in Afghanistan, they're going to say, we're only supporting the side of the population that is actually fighting for the right for self-determination, because we support democracy and democracy supports freedom. You see how tricky that discourse is? It's only in the speech, but it's not going to be in the actions. All right? You have to be very smart to get that. And that's the way that it's going to act all over and all over and all over again throughout history. Okay? So we must assist free peoples, says Truman, to work out their own destinies in their own way. Yeah, right. Okay, that's what you have to say inside your head. Yeah, right. Like the invasion of Iraq was not premeditated. Like the whatever. I mean, I'm not so and 100% in favor of conspiracy theories, but some of them are very, very realistic. Okay. And number 4, the US government gave Greece and Turkey $400 million in aid so that they can reconstruct themselves. They can get up on their feet after the Second World War and they could go under the other one. So it was like a little bribe for this government so that they could follow the United States doctrine, the Truman Doctrine. Okay? Any questions until then, guys? ¿Tienen una cara de fumigados? ¿Estás fumigada, Fátima? All right. Bueno, se me fue la hora, no me había dado cuenta. Ay, ya, ahorita se va a acabar, que te estoy diciendo que ya se va a acabar. Que ya me acabo de pasar la hora. ¿Está bien? Ah, ok. Muy bien. Entonces, sin más por el momento, déjenme ver cuándo quedó la otra. Okay, we're going to have class all Wednesdays at 12. All right? Para que lo agenden, lo anoten y por favor se bañen antes de venir. All ready? Bye, guys. Have a nice one. Goodbye, guys. Bye-bye.